Stand and say the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning again. First thing on the agenda is the agenda approval. Do we have any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chair, the only item I would identify is that Engineer Nordine has added materials for 5A. So it's still item 5A, but his recommendation has changed.
Mr. Chair, I'll vote to approve.
Thank you, Shar.
I'll second.
Thank you, David. There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Public input. Is there any public input today? All right, come on up. State your name and address, please.
My name is Carolyn White. I'm representing the League of Women Voters Park Rapids, and I live out on Chippewa Loop on Long Lake. On that, you need the full address? 14388 Chippewa Loop.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a copy of a letter that we wrote together, and instead of just reading the whole thing, I'll just read some highlights and things like that in the interest of time. First off, we wanted to say that the League of Women Voters is very proud of the elections that we have, that Hubbard County has been running, and Kay Rave's and her staff have done an excellent job, and we have been proud to help wherever we could. I'm here today to encourage you to provide a secure ballot drop box during the weeks of absentee voting. We realize that the recent enacted law requires that a drop box be continually monitored and has few guidelines and a cost attached. This cost requires clarification to be determined by county staff, and the guidelines need clarification from the Secretary of State's office. We know that the drop box was well used during the last election. Several of our members who are assisting elderly parents or family members with disabilities found the drop box extremely useful. My mother voted in the last election, and at 97, it was just too physically difficult for her to get into the courthouse or anything. So she liked the idea of coming up here in the car and watching me put the ballot in the box. To her, since she had voted in every election since she was 21, that was great satisfaction. We acknowledge that the ballots can be delivered directly into the courthouse, but if you're working shifts or adults caring for children, sick family members, elderly parents, your schedule sometimes doesn't match up with courthouse hours. We also acknowledge that the ballots can be delivered in the post office. Unfortunately, the post office here in Hubbard County does not process any mail. It simply sends it to the cities, sends it back. That's 2 or 3 days in transit, and I've to the point where if I have a check that is delivered to Hubbard County somewhere, I will go and drive it there because I have lost checks in the mail. There's just too many multiple opportunities for ballots and important letters to get lost. So as officials of Hubbard County, your charge may be difficult, and we want to remind you that your greater duty is protecting and facilitating the right to vote for all our citizens of the county. And we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions or anything else we could do? Okay. We do plan on sending a letter to Steve Simon's office also to also say you need to clarify what's going on here because rural counties don't work the same as the city.
Correct. Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Is there any other public input today? Okay, since there's no other public input, we'll close public input and we'll move on to the consent agenda. Any changes or corrections there? Can I get a motion?
I'll move.
Thank you, Tom. And I'll second it. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda is county employee recognition. Let's see, we have Natural Resource Department, Roger Hensel, Parks Maintenance Worker, began the seasonal position on April 25th, 2022 this year. Sheriff's Department, Christian Zerwink, Deputy Sheriff, is recognized for 2+ years of service from June 20th of 2019 to May 15th of 2022. Social Services, Karina Block, eligibility worker, is recognized for 15 years of service effective April 23rd, 2022. Zachary Fennell began the full-time position of family-based service provider on April 25th, 2022. And Veteran Services, Darius Simon, Assistant County Veteran Service Officer, is recognized for 3+ years of service from April 29th, 2019 to May 6th of 2022. And a couple other little things I want to add. One is a happy anniversary to our administrator, Jeff Cadwell. Today is his 1-year anniversary of being employed here. And one other thing that I meant to bring up at the last board meeting, I was sent from Department of Human Services, Minnesota Department of Human Services. They're congratulating the Hubbard County Human Services Department. It says that the staff has performed perfect performance in meeting the Department of Human Services financial reporting requirements for the calendar year of 2021. All key quarterly financial reports for programs your county participates in were submitted to our Financial Operations Division on or before the report deadlines and in perfect order. This effort requires submission of 32 major reports covering the 4 calendar quarters of 2021. These reports are local collaborative time studies, MFIP collaborate funds, client statistics, SEAGR, income maintenance expenses, social services fund, Title 4E, and BRASS-based grant financial reports. And then it goes on to say that if your county participates in a local collaborative, submission of this report may require the collection of multiple local partners' reports for consolidation submission to DHS. I acknowledge this accomplishment requires planning, an effective operation, and teamwork within your county human services department. The result is a timely revenue for your county and compliance with federal reporting for us at the state. Please congratulate your management and staff on this superb effort. So I want to just thank all of them.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Darius Simon is here, so if we want to recognize that he's here and thank him specifically.
Thank you. And next on the agenda is Highway and Survey.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First on our agenda, we'll tackle the easy one today. This is a review of the bids that we received for Project SAP 029-616-008. And this is a reclamation project up on CASA 16. We're gonna do some pipe replacements and whatnot, just a road that needs to be resurfaced. And these bids were received on April 19th. And as part of this project, we plan to use a type of a concrete matting in a certain area of the road where there's water that sits on both sides for most of the year, if not all of it. And in years past, our maintenance crews had dumped riprap over the side in an effort to try and maintain that riprap as just a little bit larger boulders or rocks to try and stabilize that slope. But being we were doing the surfacing of it and the culvert replacement, we felt this was a good time to put in, more of a long-term permanent solution to it. And so we called out a product called articulated concrete block mat. And we were fairly unfamiliar with this product. We'd only seen it used one time back in 2008 on the Pleasant Avenue project. And at that time, the city engineer had put it in for a retaining pond down there. And it was a cable concrete mat, so they did the inspection on it, and they had actually designed the plan. So as far as our office, it was essentially a new product. And as we were preparing the plans, we looked at some different products that we thought would be applicable in this situation, and we kind of came up with 3 that would kind of fit the bill. And the day before the bid, we got a call from one of the potential subcontractors inquiring about this material. And they wondered if we knew of any suppliers for this material. And so, recalling what we had talked about in the design process, we gave them the contact info for 3 different suppliers of a product that we thought would meet the specifications for this. And they said that they had talked to 2 of those suppliers, and one of them had kind of questioned whether their product actually had the exact testing that was required for the certification of this material. And they were wondering if that supplier then could contact me to ask some questions about the project, what the intent of the product was. And I said, absolutely, have them give me a call. And we went through, and what it turns out is that these products, they go through various testing methods. Some are ASTM standards, and they're called out as such in the spec. And, some products have the exact testing to meet those specs, and others, they maybe do a different type of test, but it's not an exact deal. So based on, the information that was provided, we kind of talked it through, and I thought, this was a good product, seems to meet specs, and it certainly meets the intent of what we're trying to do with this area. And basically, that supplier said, okay, I'll submit these bids, these quotes out to the potential bidders, and I am going to put a note on there that the approval is contingent upon the engineer's review. And I thought, yep, that's fine, they can call me, we can talk through this. And so prior to the bids, I did, that morning of the bids, I did receive a call from one of the contractors, and we kind of rehashed what I had talked about with the supplier. And they said, well, that's a cheaper product, and that's the one that we'll go with. We'll submit our bid then with that, and I didn't see any issue with that. And never did receive any other contact from any of the other 3 bidders. And so then, fast forward to bid time, the contractor that inquired about that particular product did turn out to be our apparent low bidder. And in abstracting the bids, we noticed a significant difference in the unit price for that articulated concrete block mat between the low bid and the other 3 bidders, which, it raises a red flag, but what we don't typically do is start to review bids from a standpoint of who supplied which different products. It's up to the contractor to provide products that meet specs, and they have a variety of different ways of going about what they're gonna bid, how they're gonna actually do the construction, and that's what sets certain contractors apart from others, is just their methodology of installation and what products they use. So it wasn't a this versus that review from our standpoint. That's just not how we abstract bids. And the following day is kind of when the confusion and the concern began for this project. I received a call from a different supplier that says, by the way, I spoke to your apparent low, the product that they're intending on using is this articulated concrete block mat, doesn't meet the specs. And that was the first time that I was aware that this product just flat out didn't meet the specs as far as every specific test being done on the material. And so that was concerning to us, and so we started looking at it internally of, which products were we trying to attract with this, and what were the differences between them, and what are the ramifications of using one versus the other. And I placed a call to MnDOT State Aid, since this is a state aid project, to find out if, do we have any issues with this type of product being used? I also informed our apparent low bidder that there were concerns being brought our way that the product that they may have been bidding with doesn't fully meet the specs. And finally, I did place a call to a MnDOT representative that specializes in this type of a product. And essentially, where everybody stood at that point is the bidder felt that the product was pre-approved through our conversations, and the intent of that product was good. We wouldn't have any issues with it, and they could go ahead and they could bid it at that price, and everything would be good. The state felt that regardless of any approval discussion that was talked about, is that the products have to meet specs, and the contractors are aware of this. They meet specs in order to qualify for state funding, and The erosion control expert that I spoke with, he said essentially what we were looking for was called a rolled erosion prevention category 80A material and not an articulated concrete block mat. And that was, you know, an error on our part of speccing the wrong material. He said, you just asked for the wrong material, but he said the application of that in your case is more than likely gonna be a fine product. But nonetheless, it was called out as an articulated concrete block mat, not rolled erosion prevention control. So this resulted in a follow-up meeting with our apparent low bidder, and we discussed providing a material that fully met the specs, or there was a chance that we were gonna have to reject all the bids and put this back out for bid, just to make sure that everybody was bidding apples to apples. And, you know, they weren't very excited about this because they're like, you know, we had the conversations and, you know, we thought that this is a good product, we think it's really gonna work, and then we think that that's the intent, and I agreed that I felt that that was the intent of our project, not to go out and specifically look for something that doesn't meet the specs. At the time, we felt that it did. And puts us in a difficult position, but we also understood their position. And so that was the information that I had when I submitted the agenda last week. That's why you see on there that the recommendation would be to reject the bids. But since there, I didn't stop with that. I was still looking for some clarification on the project, on the process, and it took a little bit of time, but I finally was able to connect to the MnDOT claims engineer. And I explained the situation as much detail as I could, and the first thing he asked was whether this specific project or product, that unit item, is that what made the difference between who was the low bidder and who was not? You know, so was there a monetary advantage to that bid, that this one specific item on a $3.5 million project, is that what swayed it? And I said, no, that is not the case. There was a significant gap between bids 1 and 2, and this product was not the make or break on that. And so essentially no other bidders were adversely affected by the product or the pay item for that matter based on the disparity at hand. The product, you know, still meets the intent of the bid, but would require a change order with us and the contractor after the fact to make sure that state aid money is eligible for that, and that's not a problem. But he also felt that the discussions were all had in good faith and not in a way of providing different information to bidders. If it was different information, probably the best way to do it would be through an addendum prior to it. Well, the morning of the bid, there's no time for an addendum, but that's beside the fact. We still thought that we were getting the, you know, a spec'd material that would qualify. It wasn't until after the bids that was brought up. And so, you know, for that reason, I would recommend that the contract be awarded to the low bidder, as I do feel that it's certainly awarded in the best interest of Hubbard County, and that item itself wasn't the make or break. The overall bid, we did receive 4 bids, with Knife River Materials out of Bemidji being the low bid at $3,562,268.03, which is very, very close to what our engineer's estimate was on the project. So we feel at this time it's a good bid, and we'll get the job done with the intent that we spec'd out.
So then, if I understand you correctly, you're fine with the bid process and the bids that you received, and you would like to go with bid number 1?
That is correct, yep.
And now will he be, this bid includes the material in question, or did he resubmit with the?
Nope, there was no resubmittal. They informed us that they did submit their bid with the product that we had talked about prior to the bid. So that's what would be required with the change order. So even if we had gone through and we had like eliminated this item, this contractor would still be the low bid.
Okay.
If we were to go back and use similar bid prices for one versus the other, they still would have been the low bid. So that one particular item wasn't, like I say, it wasn't the make or break, so.
And his change order he'll still be the low bid.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Anybody wants to make a?
I would just, Mr. Chair, I would just say that Jed and I reviewed this yesterday afternoon, and haven't gone through the mental calisthenics of thinking this through and identifying and reviewing all of our options. I think this is the best option for everybody involved, fairest to the bid process, and best for the county as far as delivering this project on time this year.
Thank you.
Being that the product in question had no effect on the low bidder, I'll move to approve the low bidder.
Thank you, David.
Second.
Thank you, Dan. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carried.
Very good, thank you. And our second item, I do believe this is an easier one. This is our bids for Projects SAP 029-607-009. That's our CASA 7 reclamation and paving, goes from north of CASA 40 up to the end of the pavement on County Road 91. That's Project CP 029-091-023. And also tied to this is a Lake Emma Township, Intrepid Road and Indigo Drive. For this project altogether, we received 6 bids, with Mark Sand and Gravel Company out of Fergus Falls, Minnesota being the low at $2,337,218.68. And in your packet information, I do have that broken down with the CASA 7, the County Road 91, and the Lake Emma. And so it'd be my recommendation for the low bid. It's a low bid, they meet specs, and has Lake Emma Township acted on this? Not-
They will tonight.
They will tonight, so this would be contingent upon their approval for their portion of their project.
Did Mark Sand and Gravel do County 89?
That is correct, yes.
So are you, there was a lot of redo on County 89. Are you comfortable with this low bid?
Well, yeah, we're comfortable with it. We've worked with this contractor quite a bit. In times like this, we know we need to be on high alert with our inspection, and everything has to be very much done according to specs and what we're willing to accept. So yes, we'll keep tabs on everything.
Any further questions?
Motion, I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Dave.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carried.
Very good. We were informed road restrictions will be going off on May 16th. That's quite a bit of notice for us, but that has already been declared for our region, so I'll take the signs down at that point, but been a long winter.
And we're still on for next Tuesday? Road trip?
Next Tuesday we are on, yes, we will meet here at 8:30, the big bus tour,
Do you have a date when 113 is going to start?
1:13.
Isn't that the right road? The one in Arago that you helped get the grant for?
Oh, that is, that's not 113, what is that, 241st,
41st, I think.
141st?
241st is that.
Yeah, it's the LRIP projects.
Yeah.
We do not, we have not even seen a plan on that project yet.
Okay.
So nothing's been approved through the state. So if anything, it's gonna be a late season
Okay,
project.
all right, thanks. I'm going to have to drive by, look at the road sign, because I can't remember what road it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have natural resource management.
I understand that Crystal was gonna try to be here and was gonna be here in about 20 minutes. Do we wanna resort the order, or?
I'm gonna take this with SWCD if you wanna do it, but she should be on her way. She's for a different time slot, but.
I would suggest we'd move ahead to finance and bring Kay and do item 7 if we
Okay,
can.
let's do that. Thank you.
She was here. She's probably listening. I know we had the majority of the conversation related to the One Watershed, One Plan at the last meeting, but when I had heard that Crystal was gonna try to be here at 9:45.
Since she's making the effort to come here.
Has about 8 hours of deposition.
I noticed him sitting back there earlier.
Yeah, him. So here.
No, I can actually just hear you.
Fun watching it from this side.
Well, could we go on to committee reports?
Well, we could do the committee reports, or we could start with item 6B and have that conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to do that?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
My actual second item on the agenda for today is a land protection donation agreement with the Trust for Public Lands. Again, this is for the same parcels that we have been talking about in the past, the 160 in Schoolcraft Township and the 554 acres or whatever it is in Lake Emma and Clay Township. It's just another step in the process for accepting those lands, the 714 acres, from the Trust for Public Lands and using those as county forest lands.
Mr. Chair, wasn't this the property that we talked about? We can accept this, but then we're gonna have to look at selling.
Yep, I believe so.
So-
Part of this is,
What's that?
part of this is the 46 acres that we talked about previous meeting.
This is everything except that.
Okay, thank you.
And with this stuff, because they're using Lessard Sam's dollars, you won't be able to do the land exchange with tax forfeited lands and then sell, because then you would basically be selling the stuff that they gave you.
But we do have the map, a working map of taxable lands versus non-taxable lands within the county, and we will be coming up with a list of recommendation of, where we have taxable lands in the middle of a big block of tax exempt lands versus tax exempt lands, little block in the middle of developed property, right? So our goal would be to work to sell or exchange or make those available, to clean those up, and to make appropriate properties available for development. So we'll be bringing that forward probably before the end of the summer.
There was a motion, I think, that Char made on, was it the 166 acres where it was conditioned?
Was it 46 acres?
46 acres.
It
Yes.
was a condition of her motion to make that swap.
Right, and that's different because we're using county dollars to purchase that rather than the Lessard Sam's dollars. So that's not a problem, we can do that. And I've already identified a potential parcel for the exchange on that one.
Okay. Just want to verify that's being done. Okay.
And this all meets legal review and everything?
Yep.
Okay.
I believe that if we did not accept this, then it would be offered to the DNR, is that correct?
Most likely, yes.
So I'm gonna move to approve.
Thank you, Shar.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Do you want to just carry forward to the first one? Do you want to just carry forward to the,
Certainly,
Watershed
I
one
can,
plan?
if we want to.
or do we want to skip till 7? Okay. Mr. Chair, your choice.
Well, since Crystal's on her way, we will defer and we'll have Kay come forward. Thank you.
All right.
So I'll set this item up again. Initially, the acceptance of the grant for, I think, $15,000 to offset some of the cost for video monitoring related to the change in the requirements of video monitoring of drop boxes was just put in a couple of meetings ago in a very routine matter until I asked it to be pulled and asked you to ask the question about do we want to commit to that ongoing expense? Do we want to commit to that ongoing, administrative challenge or the new legislation relative to management of Dropboxes in elections? So what's still on here is consider accepting the Dropbox grant for the purchase of those materials to do that for this year. And kind of in my mind, the answer to that is if you accept that, then we're moving forward and just working with that and maintaining the Dropboxes. If we don't accept that, you would still at some point have to tell us not to accept the Dropbox, or to remove the Dropboxes and not use them for this year. Because right now, the only thing we're dealing with is the acceptance of the grant. So the underlying question of whether or not we're going to use the Dropboxes in the new environment and with the new law and the new regulations is a question that we aren't asking yet, but we're asking that because we wouldn't accept the money if we were planning on making that step later.
Thank you, and good morning. Can I add a requirement of having Dropboxes there is that there must be 24/7 video monitoring of those Dropboxes. And that is what the grant is to help offset those costs for. And I believe it was 15,000 per Dropbox, which we have two. So it would be up to that award amount if the board wishes to accept and continue using Dropboxes.
If I read the statute right, it's the, only during the time, 24/7 during the time periods where the voting's accepted. It was what, 40 days before the primary and
46 days
40 before
prior
the
to
general?
the primary
Yeah.
and the general, and then if this was to remain for 24, there's also a
Yes.
PNP presidential nominating primary, which would be in March or,
We're talking,
so 46 days prior to each election.
yeah,
And then there's
Little over 90
retention
90
afterwards
days.
to
22 months
access.
worth of retention on that video, yes,
And then staff time if there's something in question.
yes.
Do
So,
you-
and it's a one-time, I believe, of 15,000 per.
And we'd already gotten the bids to do the cameras, and we were already working up to plan to be able to do this. So we would have the capacity to have this in place this year. That's not the question. The question is whether or not that makes sense for Hubbard County elections.
Kay, do you know approximately how many people use the Dropbox?
Well, I was talking to Sandy this morning, who we rotate who goes out to the drop boxes, and there was a good handful, maybe 20 yesterday, and not elections, but tax payments and whatever else. You know, we renamed the boxes official documents so that anyone can use them, and since our office is the one that distributes mail, we take whatever's in there and distribute it as we would any other mail. So when I started in 2015, we were not using the drop boxes. And the commissioners at that time said, let's use the drop boxes. And it was really for just tax payments. And it's taken years to build up to the point where they're now a very good service, but not just for elections. Taxpayers and whatever other departments use it. I think the recorders and the assessors use it, and I think it's appreciated by the taxpayers. However, I don't think that's what the issue is right now, and if the board does wish to not use drop boxes for the 46 days prior, I would ask that they become disabled for all services for that 46-day period.
So there is, someone did some research via cell phone pings to look at the fraud that happened in the last election. And most of it centered around drop boxes. I agree, it's a great convenience. I will not be voting in support of accepting this grant, because I think there's a bigger issue that we need to discuss, is whether we want to have drop boxes during election. And also, this is a one-time grant, and so then this is an expense that will be continued, that we will have to levy for.
Administratively, Kay brings up a valid question as to whether or not, the boxes were put in place. COVID happened, we adapted to use the drop boxes for elections. That really kind of happened really quickly. They weren't used for that prior to COVID, right?
Correct.
Okay. So the issue is administratively, can we separate the use and sign those things appropriately so that they are used for other Hubbard County transactions and not elections?
And I'm only discussing election.
And the second question of that is, if somebody does in fact drop a ballot in those boxes, what's our process related to registering a spoiled ballot and making sure that
I would suggest if we decide not to use drop boxes, they would be removed during that time.
that would probably be the cleanest? It'd be the hardest for somebody to make a mistake that way.
But there again, that is not, we're not discussing
Yep,
that
right,
at this
right.
time,
Yep.
even though it plays into the decision that we make today.
Yeah. So, and you could make that second motion to not allow drop boxes for elections in Hubbard County after this, but the first one that we're considering is to accept or not accept the grant. You're correct.
So, okay, if I understand correctly, then the drop boxes have only been used for one election.
I'm sorry, just one election, or could you clarify that question?
As far as one general election or one.
A
prime-
national election?
National election. If they were only used for.
Well, we allow
COVID.
them to be used as official documents,
Okay, but I
Dropbox,
mean
for-
I mean
so,
for-
so
for
anybody can
ballots.
put
Ballot. He's
anything
talking
in
about
there.
ballots.
I mean, yeah, excuse me, I'm just talking ballots, yeah.
Well, it'd be for the primary and the general
Okay.
for 2022.
And the first time we used them was for the primaries in 2020?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to 2018 and if they use the drop boxes, I don't recall.
Okay.
But really 2020, you know, with the year of COVID, and that's how we got the second drop box that's right outside on the front door. And we had grant funding for that box as well that was used for COVID dollars.
Okay.
So, but yes, to answer your question, it really took off in 2020.
Okay. And if we accepted the grant today, but then later decided not to use the drop boxes for elections, would we be able to give the grant dollars back? Or are we tied, are we,
No, we would have to give the grant dollars back.
okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I'm believing what Char says, because I think these drop boxes just simply normalizes mail-in ballots. I do believe in absentee ballots, for sure, but for specific purposes, you know, like my members of the military who aren't around home, or someone who's medically ill and can't go to a voting booth. But I do believe in in-person voting with voter ID. I just wonder, can those boxes be on the inside of the door in view of our security during normal working hours?
Yes, but they would still need that video recording.
They'll have to, even though you got security there that would be watching.
As I understand it, yes.
But security may be helping people enter the courthouse so they would not have their eyes on.
I was primarily thinking of maybe not the drop boxes for voting, but drop boxes for other things, so where they don't have to go through security.
Oh,
The greatest advantage of the Dropbox is that they're available outside of normal business hours.
I had some similar concerns the other raised. Number one, the new law doesn't require drop boxes. They're an option. That if used, you must follow the new state requirements, which we all have kind of agreed they haven't really clarified very well. Ballot boxes came about due to COVID restrictions. Since those restrictions no longer exist, that solution may or may not be necessary anymore. Additional costs may be incurred anytime there is a need to review video. Who will pour through the videos looking for whatever is necessary? Who will maintain that data? And who is ultimately responsible for the system once it's installed? Those are three big questions for me. And of course, the ongoing cost. Just because the grants are available to cover up to $15,000 of the initial install, these grants are still being paid by Minnesota taxpayers. It's still tax dollars being used. And who's going to cover the recurring costs beyond that time period? We have 3 tried and vetted measures for voting: the current absentee ballot system, early in-person voting, which takes place many days prior to the general election, and in-person voting on election day. There is ample convenient opportunity for citizens to vote. These methods that we currently have are consistently safe and ensure access and the protection to every vote. I'm not sure I can say the same thing about drop boxes, 100%. So because of that, I would not be in favor of doing the drop box.
Can I
the
respond
grant.
to your comment that I think in the event we had a public data request or, you know, was some way required to review that footage, we are very lean in our departments, and it would either be on overtime hours, overtime dollars, or if it were me, you know, or a manager, it would be as exempt, but it would be outside of regular business hours, requiring evening or weekend work.
My experience with other public entities that have video, every time the public questions something, somebody literally has to pour through all of that video and try to find that particular concern that the public is looking for. And virtually every time, not a single employee of those public entities are too charged up about having to spend all that time doing that. Because it's a lot of time, and it's disruptive to your regular workday. So there's a lot of other things that go with this than just the simple dollars and putting in the camera, and I'm not so sure everybody really sees all of those things or knows what all those things are. So it becomes awfully burdensome for the county, not only tax dollar wise, but time wise. And there are other options that are very convenient.
In researching cameras with Bobby, the maintenance director, he had said he'd found a video that was motion, it would start recording on motion. However, I think the grant states that it has to be continuous. So in point of what you just said, yeah, it would be hours and hours of pouring
That's
out.
a lot of data, a lot of data.
That we would store for 22 months after each election period.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that we not accept this grant, but before I do that, I would suggest that we would take up the Dropbox issue at a work session. And then we can invite, that gives the public a chance to come and give comment before the board would make a decision on the Dropbox. But with that said, I will make a motion not to accept the grant.
Thank you.
Now, second.
Thank you, Tom.
I think by doing that, you kind of, the fate of the drop boxes is done then, except for other, at least for ballots,
Okay.
whether you want to keep it open for other stuff.
So are you suggesting that we would vote on that after this one? After this motion?
Well, if you're going to do a drop box for ballots, you got to have video surveillance.
Okay.
So we're turning down the grant for that, and if we're not going to do the video surveillance, we're obviously not going to do a drop box for ballots.
Well, the only thing would be is if we changed our minds and did do a drop box, then we would be paying.
We would be paying for the,
for it.
yep,
And,
so there's that.
I don't know, I know voting's important. I think about some people in some countries can walk for miles, if not days, to cast their ballot. But yet it seems like here in America, if we can't do a drive-up or vote from the comforts of our kitchen table, somehow it's voter suppression. And I guess that's my feeling. Voting is important, and people should make the effort. And as David explained, there's several options besides a drop box to get your ballot on time.
I've done, in my lifetime, I've done both an absentee ballot in 1972 when I was in the military, and then I also have stood in line for a long, long time to vote. I was just determined to get my vote in. And I believe that's what it's about.
Is
I
any-
don't think, we don't have a second, do we?
Yeah, Tom.
Oh, you second, okay, excuse me, I didn't hear that, okay.
So we had a motion and a second. If there's any further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
And then just a point of clarification, Mr. Chair, did we want to have a conversation, or do we want to have an internal conversation about how to manage the drop boxes for non-ballot purposes during those 46 days? Can we do that internally, and if we need to bring that to a public meeting, we can do that later with that? We could do that in a couple of weeks at the general government meeting and just have a conversation and bring that forward long before we get to that point.
Sure, yeah, we got time. Thank you.
So then, Mr. Chair, I would ask, does the board wish to vote on the Dropbox at this time, or would you like to have a discussion later?
I think that might be something we can touch on the general government committee, and then if we need to bring it forward.
The issue that I was relating to at general government was the administration of the drop boxes for non-ballot issues. If you want to have a conversation to not use drop boxes for ballots and a motion now, that's completely up to you. If you want to defer that to that conversation, that's appropriate too. But I do agree with Commissioner De La Hunt. By turning the money down, you've almost said that we're not going to use drop boxes for ballots.
True. The only question I have is it wasn't on the agenda. And I know it's a topic that can be a hot button topic.
And then the public could weigh in.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll discuss both elements of the drop boxes and bring it forward later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty, 7B.
Okay, thank you. This is an application for lawful gambling for the East Hubbard County Fire District. Gambling is held at the Red River Liquor Company in Akeley Township. And really what they're doing is simply taking over the lawful gambling that used to be done by the Lions Club. And so it's really a new application, and so that's why I'm bringing it to your attention.
And it looked like there's some piece missing, so pending required documentation.
And I do have
Did you get-
all
did you
of that
receive
now.
that?
I've
Okay.
also checked with the state, so I should have complete documentation.
Okay.
I also started out just having it approved for pull tabs, which is incorrect. That's why it's been changed to lawful gambling. That will cover anything they do with it, whether it's a raffle or a meat raffle or bingo. So it's all under that umbrella. If I had just kept it as pull tabs and they wanted to do bingo, they would have had to come back for a new application. And
Thank
so
you.
This was the first one I've had, I think, in the time here.
And we've changed an internal process to not put the applications on with these. Basically, as Kay brings them forward, she'll represent that she has a complete file. And if you have questions about that, you can. But we're trying to get the right balance of the information you need, who's applying for what type of license. They've met all the criteria and qualify for that without actually putting an application on the public website.
So we'll need a motion.
Yes, please.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you.
Okay, we will go back to Natural Resources, 6A, the Crow Wing, One Watershed, One Plan.
Good morning.
Morning.
So, Mr. Chair, we have a resolution put together to support and participate in the Crow Wing One Watershed One Plan planning process, with Hubbard SWCD serving as the fiscal agent for that process. And we do need to have all of the counties and SWCDs participating to have this resolution turned in for the proposal, which is due on June 10th, and I'm working on preparing right now. We did talk about it at the work session recently. Did any questions arise or anything? No?
And this is not the memorandum of agreement, we'll do that later. This is just that we anticipate to enter into that agreement. Yep.
That's correct, and I do have a draft version of the memorandum of agreement, but we are not required to sign that until we're funded. The proposal process looks fondly upon having a draft circulated, but it's not necessary to sign that piece until after we're funded.
Okay. Well, I know that we've already entered into the Leech Lake One Watershed Plan and the Mississippi Headwaters One Watershed Plan. And I think in order to get some of these dollars, state dollars in that, it's important to be part of the process. And I think Hubbard County is mostly gonna be in the Crow Wing.
That's correct. Most of our area is in the Crow Wing, especially the major lakes area. It's a big portion of our county. And we are not fiscal agents in the other watersheds. I think this one is a good one for us to be the fiscal agent at the SWCD, because then we will be able to be involved with all of the steps of the process very much so, and figure out and guide how we're serving the whole watershed area. It is good for us to have the fiscal agent status for one of the watersheds, because then we get some money for administration to handle that piece of it, and I think that'll provide the SWCD some additional stability over a 10-year period. So I think that's worth it. The Leech Lake River watershed is in implementation right now, and that's going very well. That's the eastern part of our county. And the Mississippi One Watershed One Plan is just beginning the implementation process. And we're still going back and forth on that contract for implementation and the policies of implementation, utilizing the Hubbard County Attorney's Office for guidance, so.
Yeah, I think over 40% of the county is in this watershed.
Yeah.
So this would be a good one for our local SWCD to be the leader of the implementation.
Absolutely, and one of the things that I've noticed in the other watersheds is that the fiscal agent frequently has more ability to bring the group together to seek other funds. And our staff is really interested in trying to leverage the One Watershed, One Plan funds for some federal funds to support other activities that we see need to be addressed on the landscape. So that would be a great opportunity for us as the SWCD and the county.
So today you need a motion to enter into, I don't know how you want to word it.
It's, I would need a motion to support and approve this resolution, I believe, would be the language.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Dave. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal.
Very exciting. I hope you guys have a great sunny day.
Yeah.
Would you like me to stay here while you're discussing your piece?
No, I'm already
Okay,
done.
Great. You're done.
I-
But I'll have to talk to him later. I'm excited about that as well. Thank you. And thank you for waiting for me. I'm sorry about that.
You're welcome. Now it looks like we're up to the administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments. A, you identified that I've been here for a year now, and you should have gotten an email from Denise related to an administrator evaluation. We'll do that as part of our meeting on May 17th. I'll get you a self-evaluation by the end of next week, so you have that along with your comments. The notice of intent to, the acceptance of proposals for the sale of Heritage will be in the paper this Saturday for 3 Saturdays. I think we've talked about that timeline, but that notice actually went to the paper this week, and it'll be out there. And then just a comment related to the valuation increases. I know that this is really a shock for a lot of people. I looked at a lot of properties and looked at the numbers, and just a reminder that a valuation increase is not going to translate into a tax increase. There will be some elements of shift, but as we've talked about the process of that, the price increases are in reaction to the market increases and our need to be within 90 to 105% of the market value from the state reports. And even if something hasn't sold in a long time, it gets an upgrade relative to the neighborhood pricing. So that's why a lot of our lakeshore property has gone up significantly. If you have additional questions, Jamie and her staff have been working. A, they worked a lot of time to get the transition to the new Tyler system. B, they worked really hard on coming up with the formulas that were going to bring us into compliance with the state requirements. And C, for the last 3 weeks, they've been working super hard at all the local Board of Appeal and equalization meetings. Those will be done this week. At that point, then they'll be working to summarize the appeals that will be coming forward to the County Board of Appeal and Equalization in June. So if you have questions, let me know, let Jamie know. They have been receiving a lot of emails and phone calls, and they are keeping a list and they are responding to them in the order that they are receiving them. So if you could help us share the message that right now they're really booked, they want to get to each one of these, they want to spend time with everybody, and they will be catching up as soon as we get through these local boards. So that's the message that we have is these conversations are really important, and right now we're a little bit behind. I think I saw that there were 75 on the list. There was 150 on the list, and they were 72 that they processed through. So they are working diligently through those as they have. But I know those last 5 local boards will be finished this week, and then they'll be able to work on developing materials for the County Board of Appeal and also be responding to individual questions.
So Jeff, I just have a question, because I'm guessing that they won't be able to get through everyone today, so will they just continue tomorrow, et cetera, until they get through everyone?
They will work through that list with every spare minute that they have.
So looking ahead at our board meeting, we will, let's just say we didn't finish that night, we would just continue then. The meeting would continue the following days until,
Continuation would be scheduled by you as the board.
yep,
If we don't get it all resolved that night. But it's not going to be a 30-minute meeting like it was last year. I think we were here for the required 30 minutes last year.
Yeah, we were.
And I know that there are a lot more questions than that. I also know that for somebody to actually have an appeal, they'll have to bring something that we didn't consider. So they'll have to have a classification or evaluation or some information that stands apart from the information that we currently have. So we'll work with people to make sure they understand if they have a valid appeal, it has to be in a certain format, and it has to include information that isn't already calculated into the assessed value. So that's part of the difficulty in the conversation. My value is too high is not an appeal. It's a statement, it's a comment, it's a feeling. I think we all empathize with the fact that these price increases are really hard on everybody. If you read the comments, it's statewide. It's not, we know that it's not just us. For example, I know a friend of mine bought property in Crow Wing County, and his waterfront property doubled in price from one year to the next.
Do you know, I haven't done any research on this, is Minnesota the only state that requires 90 to 105%? Because I know we have other tax.
Yeah, I'm not entirely.
Tax in the state
I
and
would
nation.
have to ask and research that question. Truthfully, there has to be some standard.
Yeah, I would just be interested, maybe I'll do some research on that.
Yeah, and I'd make some calls too and talk to some people, but there has to be some standard, the same as when you have a lake, like Leech Lake touches 3 counties, right? So we all have to have some standard of value, or we get to the point where one neighbor, just because they cross some imaginary line, right? They're not valued the same, or they're discounted differently. They're already taxed differently because our various tax capacities mean the calculation and the assessment. If there's a silver lining here, it's our tax rate is going to go down without doing anything, simply because our tax capacity is going to be inflated by the market. Artificially inflated, whatever, good, bad, or indifferent, but the taxes won't increase until we get to the point of considering the budget and the levy. And at that point in time, we'll have a better idea and analysis of what the impact of any increase would be. Honestly, I think we still know that in 2023, we're bringing on the Enbridge capacity. And by my calculation, that is going to be adding at least 3.5 times the value to our tax capacity as this market increase is going to be adding just the inflation. So we're still going to see a shift from residential to Enbridge. So that's a point of conversation and identifies an area for analysis. But if you have questions, let us know. We're working through it as fast as we can. I went down and talked to the staff yesterday, and I said, okay, get through it, and then we're gonna take a break, take a breather, and then we're gonna gather ourselves and start working again, because they're really working hard on this. So if you hear of anything that we need to follow up on, got an email from Commissioner Christensen yesterday, and we want to know that. If somebody's not satisfied, let me know, and I'll follow up. Let Jamie know they're doing what they can as fast as they can. I think we'll clear the backlog up very quickly after the local boards are done. And that would be all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's see, committee reports. Who wants to start?
I just have one.
Okay, Dave?
I did get to the Fair Board meeting the other Tuesday, and at some point in time, probably in 2024, the bus garage will be available if we have any interest in it. So I did inform Russ that he should reach out to Jeff sometime next year, if that looks like they're interested in doing that, which I believe they stated they would be. So however that would look, we can start having those discussions next year, if it's something that interests us or not.
Can I ask a question about the fair? They a while back, they raised some money for, I think it's a horse stalls. Have they reached their goal for that, or should we replace those old wooden ones, or where is that?
It's more of an extension thing, isn't it?
Yep, we discussed that. The extension meeting, which was held last Thursday, we discussed that. I believe we have $45,000 available, but we need another $40,000 to $45,000. I have a meeting with Commissioner Delahunt maybe later on this week, and then one with the Fair Board to kind of see what we're gonna do with that. And from what I understand from Mary Jo is that it would be hard pressed to get everything ordered and upright for this year's event. But we're gonna be working on that this week. Yep. We're taking donations.
Yeah, one of the problems too they had, is that where do you store those things too then in the off season? And they'd store them in the bus garage, and some of those stalls, the larger buses, barely fit. So if you were storing those stalls along the one wall, there wasn't enough room. So there's some logistics to the off-season stuff that they have to work through, but since that's gonna change, but they're still gonna have an interim period here where they have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have.
Tom? Well, just a couple of things. Maybe with the Parks Board, we had an update on the splash pad. If you remember, I said last time that that would, during the summer, that would probably take about 4.1 million gallons of water. Well, we got a approximate price from what that would cost, and it would be around $20,000 from used city water. So they're looking into the possibility of installing a well of our own, which would be cheaper long-term. However, that would require a variance from the city. So the Parks Board has decided to look into that, because they'd like to move forward with the splash pad. The other one?
Are you gonna move on? I have a comment with that, because
okay.
I just talked to Chip about that this morning, because somebody presented me the plan. Even if you put in your own well, that's a lot of water, and there is an option to recycle the water. However, that costs more from whoever you're buying the equipment from. So I did ask Chip when he presents that to the board to bring that as a possible option, because the city's not in favor of using.
With recycled water, you have to have a pool inspector. The water would have to be tested every day.
Okay.
So there would be that added cost as far as the county on someone would have to be staffed to do that. So, yeah, that's right. They're gonna weigh all the options, see what's
Okay.
best. Because it's a good idea for the park. I think it would, that would get a lot of use out of it.
I agree.
Kids would love
It's
it.
just a lot of water that's just going down the
Yeah.
drain for,
Yep.
yeah.
But it would be cheaper, I mean, it'd probably cost no more than $20,000 to put a well in. Well, that would be just 1 year of getting water from the city. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense to do it that way. And then the other one that I had was just Kitchell County Library Board, real quickly. We're, on Thursday of this week, we're gonna be having labor negotiations, and I'm on the Personnel Committee, so I'll be one of those that are there. All employees of the 9 libraries, all full-time employees of the 9 libraries are part of that negotiating. So it'll be interesting how that turns out, especially with inflation going the way it is. But we'll see.
That's it? All righty. Shar?
I have a lot, so bear with me. Magic Board yesterday, inflation is at 8.5% over the past year. It's a 40-year new high. Gas prices have doubled. Fuel oil is up 70% from last year. Used vehicles are up 30 to 40%. Food, clothing, and medical care is up 20%. Shelters up 10%, using up about 35% of the consumer dollars just for housing. The interest rate hikes at 25 basis points in March, signaling that the feds are possibly going to higher it again 7 to 10 more times this year. In March, the 30-year fixed rate mortgages spiked to 4.67%, a level not seen since December 2018. This compares to 3.18% a year ago and the record low of 2.65 in January 2021. Commercial paper is the highest yielding investment right now for Magic. In comparison to the last 90 days on 12/31/21, the rate of return was 0.07%. On March 31st, the rate of return, this was for a 90-day investment, was 0.68%. And for a 180-day investment on 12/31/21 is what, 17%, and on March 31st, it's at 1.16%. The feds went from predicting a 0% hike in interest rates at the beginning of 21 to extend through 2024 to now anticipating a total of 10 hikes by the end of 2022. And the average investment time for Magic is 28 to 30 days, which is down from the 48-day average in 2021. And the deposit is ebbing and flowing, just like it always does with tax payments. Tom and I attended Mojave. Mojave is currently starting a trauma uninformed, which has the ACEs training for staff and handling children. We had a presentation on women after prison, which was a Native American incarceration. There was a grant from the Department of Corrections. It was very informational. And 40% of the women that were involved in this study were in prison 10 times before the age of 18. Many of them had were in abusive relationships. They'd lost custody of their children. They were homeless. They were jobless, and they found they had no answers because they did not trust in agencies that could possibly help. There's currently a healing housing project going on in Bemidji, which will help move some of these women forward to success. And there's a family development at Mojave. It's 6 sessions on mindset, where the staff will begin to reflect how they view people they support and become aware how their experiences, biases, and social systems may hyper-focus on quote-unquote individual responsibility and how that mindset affects the family. And I requested that the board would be allowed to look at the 6 sessions. I am finding the boards I'm on that have training, following the guidelines from DHS, they're focusing on a certain group of behavior. And I'll just give you an example. So I thought the presentation of women after prison was very well done. However, they had a slide in there that showed the percentage of people that were LGBTQ, but then they didn't include any other subset of how many were single moms, how many were married, how many were divorced or whatever. And so my focus is, if you're gonna start looking, if you're gonna break down people into groups, you need to look at every group, not just focus on one group. So that was one of the reasons I am interested in looking at the 6 sessions. I found out when I took the sessions offered by Prime West, that was exactly the problem. They focused on 3 different groups and that was it. So as commissioners, we need to be aware of that because every person is important. Prime Health meeting, currently there's 2,699 members as of March 31st. Family coverage has increased, which has helped greatly in the stability of Prime Health. There continues to be 85% claims to revenue, which is considered very healthy. And the total member equity right now is at $2 million. So we can now start to explore a wellness program as member benefit because there's enough money to be able to afford that. The highest drug costs are anti-inflammatory and chemo drugs. And so far in 2022, we've had 0 high claim dollar claims, which would be a claim over $450,000. And for the first 2 years that Prime Health was in business, we had 2 high claims. And so we have weathered through all that and have now built up this equity. Heritage. So for the nursing home side, in my legislative report last week, it was brought to our attention that Minnesota is the 2nd worst state in the nation for staffing in long-term care facilities. Alaska's 1st and Minnesota's 2nd. Current residents in the nursing home is 28 with a capacity of 64, although 10 beds are laid away. They are reopening 2nd floor and moving 5 residents up. It was closed in August of 2021. They're doing that because they hope to fill 5 beds on the 1st floor with short-term stay, because the rates are much better there. The full-time RN night shift was filled. There's a $5,000 sign-on bonus. Their current staffing levels are at a 4-star level. And Kirk questioned whether we wanted to lay away 10 more beds for rate increase, but we left that as per Jeff's recommendation because it might affect the sale of Heritage, because the beds would have to be laid away for a year. Park Villas at 100% occupancy, and the HUD rent increases will take effect of July 20 of 2022, and those are set by HUD. We have nothing to do with that. The Manor is, there's 13 out of 26 units filled, and they've applied to DHS for an elderly waiver to accept MA residents. However, DHS is very slow in processing that. And they had a $10,000 claim to MCIT for a leak in 1 unit. And then the legislative report that I just got, Jeff had brought this up last week, and you were correct, Jeff, that there was a settlement reached for the frontline workers that was agreed in the House, and so there's $500 million appropriated to that. There's approximately 667,000 workers currently working that worked during the COVID period, which would be about $750 per person. Included in that, the $2.7 billion owed to the federal government for unemployment will be paid, so that's a huge plus. And then Senate Bill SF 4410 passed 61-5, which agreed for wages increases for nursing home, group home staff, and PCAs. And there were several nursing homes, I guess, that either testified or sent letters in that said, if this does not pass, we will have to close our doors. So that's what I have.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, 2 of the topics I had were already discussed, that's fine. Northwest Juvenile Training Center, we had a meeting this past week discussing policies on client intakes. We had an issue on an order that came through indicating that placement was supposed to be at Northwest Juvenile Training Center, but the policies that we have in place did not allow that, so communication is going out to all parties involved with Northwest to familiarize themselves with the policies and procedures of client intake. We had discussion already, of course, with extension meeting. I won't say any more, I'll let you carry on with that, and I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I guess since you mentioned extension, I'll do that one first here. I know Mary Jo gave a report on 4-H and where they're at. I didn't realize that before COVID, there was close to 300 kids.
Yeah, we had a lot more members prior to COVID, and our numbers are down.
Yeah, like I said, I thought it was around 300 before COVID, and now we're down like about 126. But the numbers are coming up. There was a request. They're having a hard time, like a lot of people, finding summer interns or some. We have $6,000 set aside for that. And what we did was Michelle, who's the support staff there, she works 20 hours a week. We're going to increase her hours through the summer. So, Melissa, thank you. To increase her hours through the summer so that she can help with all those things that need help. Let's see, we talked about the family farm update. Those, I don't think I should really mention the people's names. They've accepted the family farm for this year, and so that'll be in the works. I'm sure the newspaper will have an article on those when they become available for public. And I think that's all for extension.
I forgot to mention something, but when you brought it up at extension, because I'd forgotten to write it down, but at Magic yesterday, they said 1.5 million people have not returned to work since COVID. And currently, there are two job openings for every person that is working. So therein lies why you're having trouble
Yeah,
finding.
it's everywhere in every business.
Yes.
It's just, it's crazy. Let's see, Headwaters Regional Development Commission, had a meeting last week on that. Our new executive director, Naomi Carlson, was her first official meeting as executive director. She was a former employee there, left to do some other work and then came back. She's been back for a couple of years now. We also have Bobby Wasika, or is it Wesika? She's a Akeley City Council member. She was voted to represent Hubbard County cities on the HRDC. We also had some update on the Finance Corporation and the homes and monies, the homes that they're working on. There's a couple actually here in Park Rapids. And some of those other things that they're looking to lend money for, which is, it's a lot of money, or a lot of different areas that the money can be loaned for. And of course, we also did a salary study. Was determined, we were losing employees, and we did DDA did a salary study for us, and we were low. That's why we were losing so many people, or some people. And so we were looking to correct that. And also, I was volunteered to be on the executive committee, search committee. And after I volunteered, one of my fellow commission members asked if I was on that committee, if I could still be nominated to be on the executive board, and they said I could be. So it looks like I have some support to be on the executive board for the HRDC. And let's see, I guess that's, we had a small meeting with the Mississippi Headwaters, One Watershed, One Plan. Crystal brought it up at the work session, or our last meeting, how she had some of the legal paperwork or contracts. John had gone through. There was some verbiage and stuff that wasn't good, let me just say that. And we had a meeting then with the vice chair, which was myself, the chairman, Crystal, and Bowser had a representative there. And we worked through it. It was basically, it actually went pretty well. And I'm glad that we did at this point, because now if Hubbard County SWCD is going to be the fiscal agent for the Crow Wing watershed, having this contract language cleared up now, I think it'll help in their process. And that's all I have. If there's, let's see, meetings to note. May 10th work session next week. Remind everybody, get your earlies. Looks like we'll be starting the meeting at 8:30. And then we'll be going on our bus tour of the area roads. That'll be exciting. Wish I was there last year.
We had a good ride on that County 3.
Yeah, I think we're gonna run by that one too, just so you can see what was done. I know the people that use it, myself included, I don't use it a lot, but when I do, it's like night and day. Yeah. It's crazy. And if there's nothing else, I guess we'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion. Whoops, sorry. Somebody else.
Or second,
Okay,
either or.
Dan makes the motion and David seconds it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. We are